Hey everybody, welcome back to the LuckyDog podcast. This is your host, Elias. I've done kind of a split review for the Waco analysis. I was recording while I was doing a live stream, so I'm going to use that as kind of an opening and a bumper, as kind of a takeoff to talk about the Waco situation, the series that is. And then I had another podcast I recorded, and admittedly, I was pretty damn tired when I recorded it, so I'm not quite as impressed by the analysis and review that I gave on that one. I kind of lost a lot of steam and energy on that one, but I might just leave bits and pieces of that at the end of this one as well. So they might kind of touch on some of the same topics on both of that. So it's kind of a double-edged review. I'll leave in the show notes the live streaming timestamps versus when the actual podcast I recorded timestamps. So if it sounds like I literally fell asleep at the end of this podcast, it's because I was recording it at the I don't know, the middle of the night or something like that. I was exhausted. So don't don't bash me too hard. If you fall asleep through hell, hopefully you get some good sleep or something. But I was like, God dang, I feel like I was like trudging along so slowly at the pacing that I was talking. I was like, this is going to be very difficult to get through for people that are already find my sense and style of reviews a little bit slow as is. So I said fuck it, I'm just gonna leave it in. So yes, here's the Waco review. Sorry, it's a little bit not quite as direct, but I'll leave it in the timestamps. What exactly are you listening to? So thank you for listening. Take it easy.
was was an interesting topic, obviously, to check out, mostly because of the real, true life events of it and whatnot. And granted, I have not done any research on it besides watching a movie review or two. Sorry, TV review or two. But I'll go back and look a little bit more information and historical factual information so that we can have some knowledge on it before jumping into the full review. But before I kind of go into it and preface it, I'll do a little non-spoiler review here live. So the movie essentially, where is my bumping music? No, I thought I had some. Okay, so anyways, what were we talking about? Waco. The the series as a whole, I will say, without having really that much factual information behind it. Um, I want just the art. Where's the flume? I like some flume. So, anyways, um, without knowing too much factual information about the Waco situation, this series clearly is biased. It sides alongside the ball. Give me 2 seconds. I feel like I need to have this in front of me. The Branch Davidians. Sorry. So essentially, the Waco the Waco series focuses on two aspects. And the two aspects that I believe that they're trying to tackle are the FBI hostile takeover and ATF. Sorry, that's ATF and FBI. And they want to be clear about who's responsible for what. So essentially, without saying too much, there is a siege on the cult of the Branch Davidians, which which happened in 1993, Waco, Texas. And so I'm trying. I don't want to. I guess spoilers feels like a weird thing to say about a historical movie, but if you just don't know anything about it, I don't want to go in saying this is what happens, this is what happens, this is what happens. But essentially, without going into too much detail about what happened. Sorry, I'm kind of going around the roundabout because I'm thinking in my head about how to say it without giving. I don't want to say spoilers because that just sounds. It sounds weird when you talk about spoilers or when you say that about history or something like that. It's like, well, spoiler alert. I don't mean it like that. I just want to say there's things that happen throughout the series that are very eye opening, that are kind of biased. They are seriously biased in a way, but they also want to say, maybe these people were not as crazy as they were, put out to be. So the Branch Davidians, this cult that is in Waco, Texas, is basically being infiltrated by the ATF at the beginning of the series, and there is something really fucked up that happens when the infiltration happens. The first couple episodes are kind of slow moving when it comes to the actual pacing of it, but what they're trying to do is they're trying to entrench you into the cult as if you are one of the people that are joining the cult, so that you are kind of taking the same side that David Thibodeau took when he was being introduced into the cult. So the two sides that you're looking at in this Waco series are from the FBI's and ATF hostage negotiator, played by Michael Shannon, and the other perspective is essentially from David Thibodeau. It's not 100% from his perspective, but it's kind of from the inside the cult and then from within the FBI, and they are kind of flipping back and forth between those two about the what actually happened at this Branch Davidians compound. And so I guess because I didn't have any I didn't know anything besides there's a siege that happens upon the compound, and I know that there's death that happens within the compound. I just didn't know to what degree or what caused it, or who to point the fingers at, or whatnot. And this series definitely complicates things, but it also says maybe the cult members might not have had as negative or contrary beliefs to what the FBI or the ATF were saying. And I don't know. I'm not really. I don't have enough information to say whether they did or not just straight up siege the compound, and they mishandled the negotiations with the Branch Davidians that led to the deaths of families. And so it's difficult to say without going into really too much spoilers, but I will say for the majority of the season, I thought the season in overall execution of the cult, just like how it works, is very interesting. They definitely don't put David Koresh in. I don't think they put him in a shining light, although they kind of. David Koresh is the cult leader of the Branch Davidians, and he is just a son of a gun. Like, I don't have anything nice to say about that guy. But Taylor Kitsch or I think his name's Taylor Kitsch from Battleship and True Detective Season 2. This guy acted his freaking ass off. I think this puts Taylor Kitsch on the map. I gotta say that Michael Shannon, I thought, was gonna steal the show. Or Shea Whigham. I love some Shea Whigham. He was in Boardwalk Empire. He was in Homecoming. He's like I guess is that considered a character actor? He kind of plays the same guy and everything, but he's just a hard ass. But they also have. Do you remember the bad guy off of Barry season 1? I think the heavyset guy. I don't remember his name, but he's in this too. So they clearly put the casting in a light that you are sympathetic with the cult. I think that a little bit of a problem with this with this show, it does feel like a 6 episode movie, or miniseries, I guess. I think the sympathetic nature of how they're trying to paint David Koresh in a lot of it is a tad problematic, but they also show cult members having a problem. They show a chunk of cult members having a problem with the way that he's handling the situation. So for anyone that wants additional information, I'm going to continue just talking about what happens throughout the series. This is more or less, I'm going to talk about the last episode as well, so you could call it spoilers if you want to, but essentially the first 5 episodes are entrenching you into the cult members. The first couple episodes are, and then the mid episodes are the first siege by the ATF, and then the second siege at the very end is by the FBI. And they're trying to be very specific with saying who wants to they're being very specific with saying, ATF is responsible for the first siege, FBI is responsible for the second siege. Excuse me. So, regardless, the casting of everybody in the Waco series was, I'd say, it was really good. I think the majority of this Waco cast. Let me see. Michael Shannon, Taylor Kitsch, Andrea Riseborough, Paul Sparks. If you don't know who Paul Sparks is he was the writer in House of Cards that he was having. He was the writer in House of Cards. What do we have? Roy Culkin. I was like, okay, so David Thibodeau. I was like, what's the deal with David Thibodeau? And he's the guy that we're kind of following entering in this cult. Now, I do feel like oh my gosh, are you serious? I just fucked up. Dang it. Is this a weed farm or something? What's going on here? So, sorry. David... Oh, I'm fucked. Oh, this is bad. Ah, dang it. That is not good. Not good at all. I'm gonna take this. Anyways, Roy Culkin. I was very curious about who the heck Roy Culkin was. Well, I recognized his face before I recognized his name because I didn't see who he was at first. But I was like, Roy Culkin, that name, or the David Thibodeau with this face. He just has that face. And so I was like, wait a minute. And it was the Culkin brothers. Macaulay Culkin, everyone knows him from Home Alone. This is Macaulay Culkin's youngest sibling, Roy Culkin, playing David Thibodeau, who is the guy that's kind of being introduced at the beginning of the series to this cult. It's very interesting. And I'd say my only problem is he doesn't really ever seem to have... I don't know, his motivations feel weird. I know it seems like he wants to be with what's her face? Michelle Jones, I believe. But I'm not sure if that's ever really clear that he confronts David about it. I don't remember him ever doing something that was memorable in that manner. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. I do think that he did a pretty good job of being the proxy for the audience. I would have probably questioned a couple of his things. I know that he kind of falls in love with Michelle Jones, but I would have been like, this isn't, this is not cool. Like he's forced to marry Michelle Jones, but like David Koresh still is having sex with her and all the other women, and apparently David cannot quote unquote enjoy sex. He's taking on the burden of having sex for all the men. It's like, shut your ass up. Like he said, the Michelle Jones is played by Julia Gardner. A lot of people remember her or know her from Ozarks on Netflix. And so Julia Gardner, she's gonna be a badass actress for a very long time, in my opinion. I think that she has gravitas. Like she's tough, and she reminds me of what was the Three Billboards lady. She reminds me of a young Frances McDormand. I think that she channels that kind of energy. It's very strong, very passionate about the things that she does. And she holds the screen. My only problem with the Waco series is I feel like they definitely they dramatize it in a way that just makes it not laughable, but like pulls me out of the realism of the movie. Like there's this whole bit where, ooh, that was sick. Y'all saw that, right? I almost got the skirt started. I almost ran into the wall. I mean, this is a nice car. I wonder if I can take it. So, anyways, there's a few scenes that are a little over the top. Like they happen to get. At one point, they show the FBI and ATF or whoever is doing the negotiating at the time, because there's the 60-day standoff or 50-something day standoff. Like I said, I need to go back and check my notes. But the standoff, it seems that they tortured I don't know about tortured is probably a strong word, but they were apparently the FBI was blasting music and sound into the compound for 60 days during the nights that they were trying to get the Branch Davidians to come out, because the first siege went so bad. Like they clearly made it that the ATF shot first. The first thing David said was, there's women and kids in here, and they're his kids. All the kids are his. And so that's the first thing he says to the ATF, and they just make it seem like the ATF just started firing into the compound, and then the Branch Davidians were firing back, and that's what turned into the shit show that turned into the hostile, what's it called, the standoff between the Branch Davidians and the ATF / FBI. Turns over to the FBI, and then the FBI ends up just not, like I said, torturing's a strong word, but they show at the majority of the time they're trying to keep the Branch Davidians up, and loud music, random ass sounds. They're blasting loud lights in the windows and stuff like that, and they're trying to negotiate the kids to get out and other families, and it's like, ugh. It sounds like the negotiating went really rough, and there were a couple people that were trying to prevent a dangerous hostile takeover of the compound. John Leguizamo. Most people are like, John Lego who? The guy that played Sid in Ice Age. You might remember him from that. And he was also in Bloodline? Was that what that was called on Netflix? I kind of forgot what the name of that show was. Yeah, Bloodline. With Kyle Chandler. Actually, the same producers as from Bloodline. So, John Leguizamo he was the guy that infiltrated the Branch Davidians, and he was trying to tell the ATF that y'all don't need to go in, arms blazing and everything. You don't need to go in heavily armed because they were not going to engage or anything like that. They're just families. But the way they made it seem like the ATF just pushed the compound, that the Branch Davidians were defending themselves, and that it really was a botched job, among other things. So it was quite sad to see how the siege takeover at the very end happened. This was the last episode after there was that little rock band scene at like episode 5. At the end of it, the Branch Davidians, they have a band, or they have like a Christian band kind of set in the background, little church, band kind of thing. And they happen to get enough, I don't know, electricity for about 10-20 minutes, and they're trying to play music to drown out the absurd noises and sounds or whatever they're trying to blast into the compound while, at night. And so that was a little bit, goofy, but or just like felt out of place because David's like putting on like a rock band concert with some sort of spotlight on him coming out of nowhere, and the FBI is like, oh wow, it was like kind of random. Let's go find somebody. But anyways, that last episode was the one that I decided that it definitely needs to be recommended. Majority of the time I think if 5 out of 6 episodes are just, fine, but then that last episode hits and this all happens to be about, a true story, I do find it a little bit, I bump it up in my ratings a little bit just because it makes it that much more important to view, I guess, maybe. And you gotta go into it, knowing that it's probably biased. It's not word for word what exactly happened, but there are characters throughout it. The last 2 episodes, I forgot his name actually. Shut up. I said shut up. What is his name? Eric Lang plays Ron Engelman. We've seen Eric Lang in Escape at Dannemora and Narcos and even Lost and Unbelievable. He's a great character actor, I believe, and he really transforms into all of his roles. Oh my gosh, this dude's not getting any shut. Anyways, let me see. I can't think what this is. So anyways, the very last episode contains Ron Engelman, explaining to the Branch Davidians and whatnot, or not explaining to them, but explaining kind of for them. He's a radio broadcaster, and he has some sort of he knows about the Branch Davidians, and he's trying to help them throughout the negotiation. And apparently there was just really poor communication between the ATF and FBI and all the levels of government and law enforcement that were involved in this. That's why it feels like such a botched job on the negotiating part, or the negotiating of everybody and everyone listening. But yeah, so the last episode has the FBI infiltrating the compound of the Branch Davidians after about 60 days, I want to say. I don't remember exactly how long the standoff was, but I'll get the firm number. The kids were hungry. The mothers weren't producing milk. There's, stress everywhere. The food is low, water, supplies are low, and David's in there, and he's telling everybody, I've got to finish this book of the 7 seals, of the 7 demons, of the 7 seals. And it's like, the show knows his ideals are bullshit, because there's multiple times that the Branch Davidians are trying to get their message out to the FBI. They're like, play our message for live TV, play it on the radio. We need to get our message out. And so every time the show plays the message, they're like, they literally drown the sound out when David starts talking because they know the audience, us, do not want to hear it or know that it's bullshit. And that's where I feel like it's a little bit skewed. It's like, wait a second, I don't exactly understand all of your ideals. Like, who are you worshiping again? Like, he keeps saying God and God talks to him and whatnot, but he can't do certain things till the certain seals are shown. I'm really curious about what this religion they were trying to evoke, unless he was just crazy. I'm sure he was a level just crazy, but I want to know if there's any if there's like real factual information that he was trying to glean from. But during this, every time he was talking about his ideals, they would literally just, drown it out and go to the next scene or something like that, and they'll be like 1 hour later, him still talking about the demons and the seals and whatever else. But yeah, anyways, the very last episode is completely messed up. It's all the characters that we've really cared about, especially the women and the kids and whatnot, that we cared, to an extent. Pretty much all of them are going to, oh God, that's not good. Pretty much all of them are going to, die at some point. And so the way that it happens is the FBI is apparently like, fuck it, we're going in. And they're trying to, the negotiations are over. They're going to infiltrate the compound, and they absolutely did infiltrate the compound. The compound was infiltrated by tanks, and the media was controlled as well by the ATF and FBI in both sieges. The original siege was the ATF, the second one being the FBI, and it's scary to see what was happening, and that they apparently were trying to control how much media was out, watching all of this happen. And so, yeah, that was obviously concerning. But from the media that was covered, there absolutely were tanks. Apparently, there were incendiary smoke rounds or something like that were not supposed to be placed, which basically means like smoke bombs that can cause fires or something like that. But anyways, the tanks, they claim in the series, all of this is claimed in the series. This is not something I've confirmed or anything, but they claim in the series that their tanks basically busted up into the compound, and they had smoke attached to them, and they were pushing smoke gas, tear gas into the compound where the families were, the men and people that were armed, people that were unarmed. They were all getting smoked. And the FBI was apparently hoping that they would just, run out of the compound, because, the mothers would want to be protecting the kids and whatnot. And that is certainly what probably would have happened. But based on what they're showing in the series, the tanks made it impossible for them. They destroyed parts of the compound where the families and kids were. Like, they kept the kids and the families in like this like freezer area, because it was containing all of the sound for people. At night, like I said, there was lights, and there was they were putting on major lights and sounds, and so they were trying to make this little bunker area for the kids and women to sleep in. But when they were in there, the tanks came in there and blocked the only entrance to get in there. And so the tanks essentially smoked and gassed all of the women and children in the compound. And the Branch Davidians claimed that they were never planning mass suicide, which is actually exactly what the FBI said that they claimed to have done. And I don't remember the exact number. Like I said, I need to go back and check the number of lives lost, but this series clearly points the finger at, you know, both of those law enforcement agencies in saying that, you know, these people are responsible for, you know, killing women, men, women, and children. Not that David Koresh was not responsible in some way as well, but they are, you know, everybody should be held accountable for this. It's not just a one-sided job. And you know, the books that it's written off of, David Thibodeau and Michael Shannon, it's probably the same perspectives that this was based off of. But yeah, David Thibodeau ended up being one of the only survivors, I guess. What is going on in the background? I can't do that. But yeah, the last episode was truly heartbreaking. If that happened in any sort of way, like what ended up happening with the tanks and the incendiary smoke bombs or whatever the heck they were using, ended up causing some sort of fire, which is intense. And I'm not sure if the negotiator, Michael Shannon's character, would the real life guy would admit that they had said, Gary Nosner. I don't know if Gary would be allowed to say that the Branch Davidians never planned mass suicide. So that was the only thing. What is this girl doing? That's it. Stick him back, just. So, yeah, that's the only thing about this this series, is that it is extremely eye-opening. At the very end of this, I was going to say the end of the review. At the end of the series, they have Ron Engelman, the radio broadcaster, talking about all the other different times that law enforcement has done this. It's been a standoff, tear gas, bullets, death, or something like that. I don't remember exactly the line, but he names off about 5 to 10 different times or something like that. And there's, you know, footage from a couple of those as well as the original series, I believe. As well as the original footage of Waco, what there was left of the footage. So, you know, at the very end, there's this, you know, kind of strong-handed message that, you know, the law enforcement needs to be responsible for it. And they talk about FBI being in denial of it. And it's like, and then coming to terms after an investigation or something like that. So it's like, ooh, like apparently they had claimed they never used incendiary smoke rounds or something like that, but then after an investigation, they actually had used them. It's like, ooh, it's rough. Now, I'm not here to say what should have happened. Obviously, we don't want death, but it was a sticky situation, to say the least. But yeah, that's a little Waco review for you. Probably that was a little bit longer and a little bit more rambling than you were expecting, but I just wanted to get that off my chest. You know, I definitely feel that series is probably worth a look. It was one of those series I didn't really want to watch at first because of I was like, I knew this is going to be an intense watch. You know, the series, because of I had heard that, you know, the death, and that there was, you know, women and children had died, and I was like, I don't want to watch this during COVID times. It's too dark. But I ended up doing it and just pushing through. But it was dark. It was rough to watch at the very end. I was curious about how it was going to end. I didn't know the results and what was going to happen to David Thibodeau, and are they both David Thibodeau and David Koresh? Is that right? Yeah, they're both David. But yeah, that's the Waco review. Hope y'all enjoyed both the Scoob and Waco review. Go back and check the VOD if you're interested.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the LuckyDog Podcast. This is your host, Elias Roush. This podcast is sponsored by EliasRoushMedia.com, photo, video, digital media production. Today we are discussing the Waco miniseries. 6 episodes directed by John Eric Dowell and Drew Dowell. They premiered on January 24th, 2018 on the Paramount Network. The 6-episode series documents the 1993 standoff with the FBI and the ATF. So before I go any further into this mini-series review, I just want to say and preface this by saying, with respect to everyone that is involved in the real historical events, I just want to, say that all of this review is done with respect, and I can definitely tell that this Waco miniseries does have a pretty strong bias behind it. So with saying that, the Waco miniseries that was originally on the Paramount Network is now on the Netflix streaming service. And I'm sure it's just temporarily. It doesn't look like it's going to be on there for full, the entire time, or that it was bought by Netflix at this time. But the Waco miniseries is loosely based. I don't know if it's loosely based or if it's heavily based, but I would say that it looks like it's the majority of it does have historical context in it about a cult that was breached by the ATF and FBI. And so there wasn't too much information I knew about going into this historical event. And so I was mostly interested in watching this because of hopefully the historical connections to it and maybe just a little bit of enlightenment. But with saying that, yes, there is a very strong, heavy indication in the bias. So with saying that, let me bring up the notes real quick. 2 seconds. Okay. So, I have a few notes off the first couple episodes, but I will say the first few episodes, first 2 episodes are really introducing you to the cult, and they're introducing you to the Michael Shannon character. So Taylor Kitsch plays the cult leader, David Koresh. Michael Shannon plays Gary Nosner, who is an FBI negotiator. Now, the first few episodes are kind of a slow build, slow cooker, kind of trying to entrench you in the world and kind of get you wrapped up around David Koresh's spell to understand why somebody would want to follow him into this cult. Now, I'm going to talk complete spoilers throughout this season. I will say, if you haven't seen or you're unaware of the historical events in this, I'm going to discuss that all in detail according to the miniseries as well. So I just want to preface that. I think that the majority of this series is just relatively fine when it comes down to the overall structure of it. The acting. I think the casting's actually really strong. The acting's strong as well, but the writing is not one of his strong suits. And in some scenes, I can clearly tell it just is not as it's not as high production as something like a movie would be. Now, with saying all that, I will say that this 6-episode series feels very much in the length of kind of a long form movie in a way. So I did like that. I did like the casting. I like the acting. The pacing is a little questionable at the beginning, but it really revs into gear once you understand the direction of where this is going. The cons, like I said, the writing. I think some of the editing's a little bit, not its strong suit as well. Also, um, okay, so let me hop into the notes for episode one. The SWAT team has a cold opening with busting in to showing them about to bust into the Branch Davidians compound called Mount Carmel, I believe. And this is all taking place in Waco, Texas, obviously. Um, I did write down, looks like somewhat of it does look like a television show as opposed to a movie. Like kind of a lower budget True Detective intro is something that I noticed. I was like, I can kind of see where they're trying to go with this. Um, I was actually surprised by Michael Shannon and Taylor Kitsch being, the prominent actors in this series, and Michael Shannon is not shown in any of the commercials and any of the marketing, to my knowledge, that I saw on the Netflix material at least. Shea Wiggum, obviously, he's another great actor. We've in both Michael Shannon and Shea Wiggum from Boardwalk Empire, and Shea Wiggum from other things as well, and they're both from other things, but both great actors. Taylor Kitsch was someone I was not expecting to hit as well as he did. He is a fantastic actor, and he's really embodying this kind of sadistic, but also somewhat charismatic cult leader. But I know they're trying to manipulate you in the first couple episodes for the us to really understand why anybody would want to be entrenched with this cult. But obviously, there's some really fucked up things going on with it. Um, let's see. Casually, we find out David is the father of every kid in the compound, just about, and um, he's also married all of the women, and he's taking on the burden of sex for all the men. It's like, shut your ass up. Like that was something that was bothering me a little bit. And so uh we have the cult, we have everybody that is in the cult. I think that the actors that are within the cult, we have Taylor Kitsch as David Koresh, who's running the cult, Andrea Riseborough as Judy Schneider, and her husband Paul Sparks, who's played by Paul Sparks. Steve Snyder is I think they said he's like a theologist or something, like some sort of well educated something or another that used to live in Hawaii, and him and his wife came to David's compound after listening to a couple I don't know, audiobooks or something like that from his buddy. They do go through in the first couple episodes to kind of try to emphasize that people are unsatisfied with their lives, and so that's why they would want to join the Branch Davidians. Now, this series is not really trying to convince us that David actually had a point. It's more or less pointing out that the government and law enforcement might have overstepped their bounds. Now, this is clearly a series that is not in favor of having, strong military force in situations like that in this, because it could lead to, things, pretty horrible outcomes. Um, we got Shea Wiggum as Mitch Decker, excellent in this series. Melissa Benoist as Rachel Koresh, David's wife. I really liked her. Julia Gardner plays Michelle Jones. Um, Julia Gardner is on Ozarks, is what a lot of people recognize her for, and I think she is just going to be a stellar actress when she's older. I mean, she's still a fantastic actress now, but I think she's only going to get better. Um, Demore Barnes plays Wayne Martin. He's great in this, and then all the children, they're relatively children actors, is what I'd say. What else do we got? Glenn Fleshler as Tony Prince, who is running the FBI negotiation stuff, and he is really hard ass. He's I think he's the primary antagonist, and Barry, which we've talked about before. We have Eric Lange as Ron Engelman, who is the he's a radio broadcaster who starts to spout the ideals and possible inhumane rights that are being broken with what's happening with the cult in this siege. So by now, I would have expected you to have seen the series, or you don't care about being quote unquote spoiled on what happens throughout the series. But essentially, there are two sieges, and one is shown at the very beginning, which is actually episode 3, and then there's another siege around episode 5 ish. I think it's 5 ish, and they have this pretty disturbing takeover of this compound, and the use of force was just completely. I don't know exactly what the right word is. Completely mishandled, misused. I couldn't exactly say what the right context is, because it seems a little bit shaky about what actually happened at this compound, because based on the miniseries, it's showing that there was a fuck up on the ATF's part, which was the first siege, and then there's a fuck up with the FBI on the second siege. And there were people along this, road that were trying to stop this from actually happening and turning into anything bad. The majority of the first 2 episodes of all the Michael Shannon stuff are him figuring out and kind of coming to the realization that military force is just too overbearing in a lot of these situations. And when it really comes to bear out in the third, fourth, fifth episode, even the last, there's that show of military force. And yeah, I definitely think that once things kick into high gear around episode 3, I do feel like the first 2 episodes are just fine. They're just fine. I don't exactly believe everyone would be dancing around doing all for this wedding, and everyone would be okay, but it very much seemed that David was okay. So John Leguizamo is the guy that is infiltrating the compound as the undercover cop. There's only one episode for him to really do that, and we have to believe that David has already kind of started to infiltrate John Leguizamo's conscious, saying that he's trying to kind of get under Leguizamo's, I don't know, emotional core to kind of really understand him, especially because with his mother being diagnosed with dementia, I believe. And so, or the not the actor, but the guy he's playing. And so the first 2 episodes didn't feel like a good interpretation of what this entire series was going to be. It did feel like they kind of went in like pairs, and with the exception of that last episode, I thought the majority of them slowly got a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better, and they kind of knew exactly what they were looking for as a show and as a piece. But at the very end, when it just hits on this very visceral core of you know all these families, all these kids, and all of this unnecessary death just seemed so senseless. And I got small vibes of the Holocaust, of seeing all of these kids and all of these women and men and families and women and kids and families, all of them, being gassed when the SWAT teams and ATF and the FBI are, infiltrating the compound. Now, granted, the Branch Davidians were being looked at by the ATF for selling guns to, I think, an undercover agent, and they were already looking at David Koresh because he is married, or he has multiple wives, and he's had sex with Michelle Jones, who I think was given to him at the age of 12 by her father, which is just sickening. And there are scenes showing that, and how her family apparently was very much entrenched. Her family was very much involved in how the upbringing of the family was. And so you start to slowly find out all these different aspects about the Branch Davidians. We also find out about this one young man who we find in the first episode named David Thibodeau. And apparently, because you've already finished this series, or you're not too worried about spoilers, quote unquote spoilers, I do think that it appears that they were leaning heavily on the David Thibodeau and the Gary Nosner books that they wrote, um, based in based off this series, because the majority of this series is between their two perspectives. Now, David Thibodeau, a lot of people might not exactly realize where you recognizing this face. You're like, wow, this guy does have that kind of familiar face. Well, he is brothers with two other very familiar stars. He is the youngest brother of Macaulay Culkin and Kieran Culkin. Kieran Culkin being in Succession, Macaulay Culkin being in Home Alone. And so you're probably like, oh my goodness, that's why he looks like him. So, yeah, that pretty much should wrap that up as a whole. But I do think that my only complaint would be with David Thibodeau is I couldn't really. I was trying to figure out what he wanted. Like, I thought it was very clear what John Leguizamo wanted. He kind of wanted Faith to come back because his mother had been diagnosed with dementia, and if she lived a good life, why would she be diagnosed with that? And so that's what causes him to question faith and whatnot. So I wanted to see that in David Thibodeau. I didn't feel like David Thibodeau is explained as a character of why he would actually stay there besides Michelle Jones. Throughout the series, he ends up having to marry Michelle Jones, and kind of so that it would take the heat off of David. It's just fucked up because David knows that he likes Michelle, and he's only letting David marry Michelle, David Thibodeau marry Michelle, because he doesn't want the heat. And so we have Denny Gordon as director as well, alongside John Eric Dowd, who directed No Escape, and I believe that is the only other movie he's directed at this time. He directed let me see, No Escape, As Above So Below, Devil Quarantine, The Pugsy Keep Tapes, Dry Spell, Full Moon Rising. Okay, I really don't know the majority of those. And Denny Gordon has directed other television, such as let me see. Looks like she was probably a producer. She's a director on Hunters on Amazon, Warrior, AJ and the Queen, the Tom Clancy Jack Ryan series, For All Mankind, Goliath. So she's done a lot of television. Oh, Legion. I used to like that show, but it's not nearly as hot now. Bloodline. Okay, mixed feelings on that. Let's see which one she did. Was not crazy about that. Season 2. Yeep. Season 1 was the only thing I liked. So, yeah, Denny Gordon, she's been all through some directorial debut, or she's had a lot of directorial specials pop. My favorite would probably be Legion. Bloodline was okay as well. But anyways, back to Waco. I will say the majority of the season was very aggressively okay, in my opinion, and then it slowly started to unfold about what this was really about, and seeing how the law enforcement treated them is just absolutely sickening. It was if it's all real. Obviously, I've heard that they were trying to they were trying to get the press to kind of favor their side. They were trying to make sure, there were select things that got out about it. The incinerator rounds at the very end of the series. Well, the very last episode being, the tanks that are infiltrating the compound and everyone's trying to get in, and all of the kids, women, families are trapped in. I think it's like a freezer or something like that as they're being smoked, and so it just causes them to pass out, from what I recall, and obviously die, suffocate probably. But if all of that happened, it's incredibly difficult to watch and really absorb. Even the characters that I didn't feel like I was 100% emotionally connected to, I was just like, God, this is like really dark. And most television and movies and things like that don't normally get that dark, killing all of the most innocent on screen, but it is just really difficult. And then we get to, and then David and his other kind of right hand man, played by, I think his name Paul Sparks? Is he right here? Yeah, Paul Sparks plays Steve Snyder, and David Koresh. They're kind of buddy buddy. They kind of take each other out. But yeah, the 51-day standoff was just what seemed like a nightmare. It seemed like the ATF handed off the siege that they had originally fucked up. They had made it very clear that the siege was fucked up by the ATF, and then the second siege, or this standoff, was with the FBI. And Gary Nosner was trying to do his best to make sure that it was a peaceful outcome, peaceful resolution. And so the way it turned out was just everything but. And it's, I'm kind of at a loss of words. It was difficult to watch, seeing, like I said, the innocence just taken away. If all of this is true and they really did use incinerator rounds, the broadcaster at the end is not wrong with saying, all of these different situations, standoff, gas, bullets, death, etc., and move on. It's a little bit heavy-handed with it, but I mean, I'm not 100% opposed to what he's saying. I'm not the one that wants to say this is how negotiations have to be. But clearly something happened at this Waco compound that was fucked up on all levels. And if any of the text they say at the end of this Waco are true, they do show. I think they show some true, real clips, real life clips on there, with the gas and people, them getting shot at by SWAT team members and stuff like that. It's intense, and there needs to be like a check and power with all of that. Especially, I mean, they said that they didn't have any communications on the ground, and the ATF had no idea they were firing into a compound mostly full of kids. But I don't know, it just bewildering and really quite sad with the loss of death. Sorry, the loss of life. What else do we got to do? What else do we got to check? Alrighty, so yeah, that was the majority of the season. I had a couple of let me see. The cameraman is the one that is told he has to go get the help. Like, I'm very curious if any of that is true. If this was all dramatized to the point it's like, yeah, they had to get the cameraman to yell the ceasefire. Like, I really doubt that. I was surprised actually how David is shot in the middle of the series. I was like, holy shit, we're gonna lose David here in a minute. There is some overacting in some of the scenes. The oh my God, Karen, that's my son. It's there's very, I don't know, just not very well executed scenes with certain subplots that just don't work for me personally. The mother was kind of a hit or miss on that for me. And the way this is shot, it feels like we're supposed to feel sympathy for David and his seven seals idea of about him being a lamb, and the people, the enemy is gonna roll up to the gates of Babylon and stuff like that and demand you to be tested. Like, David clearly wants everyone to be on high alert and to kind of use their motivation through what of the seven seals to take the other down, basically. And yeah, they shot Mike, this random guy that is trying to sneak into the compound at one point. Just shoot him cold-blooded murder. Like, very difficult to comprehend that, but I was like, there's so many characters I don't really care about or know that are just getting taken out left and right. So they were very select with who they would take out, kind of. But not that I'm like, I need a bigger death count. This is based off of historical events, so I can totally understand why you want the people that we're attached to live a little bit longer. I did feel like the music is a little bit too campy for the stuff that was based on real events. I just feel like they try to dramatize it, like David's like, "I'm not giving up," kind of thing, and the camera just like zooms in on him very dramatically. It's like, I don't know if that's where it kind of feels a little bit weird, because I feel like the show knows that it's kind of ridiculous. The dying of Perry, Michelle Jones' father. I'd say it's a little strung out, a little bit. Just didn't look great to me, in my opinion. And then all of a sudden, they start doing at the end of or the middle of episode 3, they start giving a day count, like day 2. Like, oh my Lanta, like, why is there a day count all the way? And then I found out it's the standoff. I did find it funny how they would kind of almost yada yada the way that David would start talking about the seven seals with the seven horns and the 7 hours or whatever the hell he's talking about. Um, I I thought it was just like, clearly we're supposed to feel sympathy for David, but the filmmakers don't want to even go into a little bit of explanation about his religion or why it doesn't make sense or something like that, or how, in what universe does he live on that he has these wives and is not in trouble for selling firearms. It's just like, what? He's not quite delusional, but he's very close to it. Let's see. Okay. I'm glad in episode 4 they addressed the lack of food and water. I didn't know if that was going to be a problem for them, but they're in the middle of like buttfuck nowhere. Okay, so I think it was Michael Shannon talking to a kid or something like that, and Shannon is like, you know what? Let's go call your mother real quick, and the boy is like, we can't call her because you killed her, and I'm just like, what the hell? Like, everything is so over the top and hand fisted. That's one thing I could not deal with. I just it wasn't even the line delivery. It was just like a boring ass line. Like, be a little bit more creative. I don't know. Let's see. Culkin's mother breaking the last barricades. That was kind of funny, actually. What's this? Michael Shannon's like, how the hell did you get in here? um, let's see. So the Branch Davidians know they can get caught with the minor weapons violations and polygamy. At one point, we see HRT mooning the cult members. Like, what the fuck is wrong with them? Like, did that really happen? I'm very curious. So the majority of the time, they want the press. The Branch Davidians just want to spread their message, apparently, and they're willing to do it any way possible, and even away from the lawyers, or even a way for them to obtain lawyers at some point. do you know what this is going to cost the taxpayers? Like, oh my land to shed. But anyways, this series was very eye-opening to kind of understanding what was going on with the Waco situation. I might do a little bit more further research and just add some notes in the description so that you can check out some things, maybe see if there's any inaccuracies that I can find. If I can't, then I'll try to say that too. But thank you for listening. Thank you for watching Lucky Dog Podcast. This was a relatively difficult subject to cover. It's not it's not exactly the happiest subject, but I think it is one of the more important subjects when it comes down to something quote unquote entertainment that has come out this year. It's not perfect. It's definitely not the best thing I've ever seen. Not even the best TV I've seen this year. But it definitely held my attention, and I would recommend it, a loose recommend, if you want to learn about this. Um, learn about learn about it or not. But anyways, check out the social media. Check out, oh yeah, sorry, learn about Waco on Wiki or some sort of more factual database or something like that. That's basically what I'm saying. Check out all the social medias: Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, YouTube, SoundCloud, all the distributors for podcasts. We're on the majority of them. If you're having craving to ask some questions and see what we're interacting on, we're on Twitch. Sometimes give some reviews on there. If you want the podcast early, you can subscribe to YouTube. If you want it in audio form, it'll be released on Tuesdays, generally on Tuesdays. And yeah, we could not do this podcast without you. Thank you, and take it easy.